Joining me is Bjorn Lomborg, president of the think tank Copenhagen Consensus Centre, which looks at the economics of global warming. Bjorn is far from sceptical about global warming catastrophe as I am, but he is a very smart cookie, former director of the Danish government's Environmental Assessment Institute and author of bestsellers including The Skeptical Environmentalist and False Alarm. Bjorn, always great to catch up with you. Now, what do you make of this climate conference? I mean, warnings of a collective suicide, followed by demands for tens and tens of billions of dollars each year of reparations from the West.
Well, Andrew, we're hearing the story that we've been hearing for, 20, 30 years, that this is catastrophe, and so we need to do everything to avoid it. Look, global warming is a real problem, but the way that it's being catastrophized not only means that we scare kids witless and we scare adults witless. There's a new survey in the OECD area that shows that 60% of all adults now believe that it's likely or very likely that global warming will lead to the extinction of the human race. There's no such thing in the UN climate panel reports. Problem? Not the end of the world. But the second part, of course, is, as you also just pointed out, if you start talking about this as the end of the world, then clearly you're also asking people to spend a lot of money. Now, the UN system loves to do that because obviously if you could redistribute literally trillions of dollars, we're talking about much more than the 3 billion you're talking about. So developing countries are talking about maybe 2, maybe $3 trillion a year, much of it coming from the rich world. That would obviously be huge for a lot of these developing countries. I totally understand why they would like to see this, but this is what happens when you catastrophize global warming. You're partly scaring your own population, and then you're also opening yourself up to huge costs in loss and damages. And of course, remember, what really matters to most people in the developing world is development. It's not just handouts, and in some sense, we're solidifying the world back into this position of rich countries that are giving handouts to poor countries. That's not a healthy world either.
Oh, Bjorn, it's the cargo cult come back big time. We thought the cargo cult with the colonialists was bad. This is just mega. This is on steroids. But you mentioned, the scaring of young people. And we're seeing, of course, now hysterical young climate activists attacking paintings by Van Gogh and gluing their heads to a Vermeer and attacking an Edvard Munch and Monet. But can you blame them when you see even the Lancet Medical Journal now reporting that because of increasing temperatures this century, adults who are older than 65, plus babies, are exposed to more than 3 billion more heatwave days, and heat-related deaths have increased this century by 68%. That's in a top medical journal. Is it true? Is it false?
That's unfortunately false. And I called them out on this. I've actually called out the editor before on this, and I called them out in Wall Street Journal and many other places. Look, what they're basically telling you is we're seeing 68% more heat deaths in old people above 65. But they're failing to tell you that there's 60% more old people in the world. That's the majority of the reason. Again, there is a real part of this. So there's about 5% real increase in heat waves. And this is one of the things that we would expect from global warming. Global warming is a problem because you will see more heat waves, and hence, if we don't do anything about it, more heat deaths. But it's not 68%, it's 5%. And what they don't tell you is that at the same time, the equivalent numbers, they don't actually do these numbers, but the global burden of disease does. And what they show is that there's been a decline in the number of cold deaths, because as temperatures rise, you'd also imagine cold waves become less frequent, and hence cold deaths declining. Cold deaths have declined 26%, and from a much, much larger number. So actually, over the same period as we've seen an increase of 17,000 people die from heat, we've seen a decrease of 500 and 24,000 people fewer dying from coal. You're just not well informed if you're only hearing 17,000 people are dying more, or actually you're just being told this fictitious number of 68% more. This is just misinformation. Some people like Trump would say this is fake news. The reality here is that we're being misled on climate, and by a very reputable journal, because they want to scare us witless, because they want us to spend trillions of dollars. This is not healthy. This is not good for the economy. This is not good for people's sanity. And it's not good for the developing countries, because what they need is development. And remember, how do you get development? How do we develop? With fossil fuels, with lots and lots of cheap, reliable energy. Now, in the long run, we should find a way to avoid fossil fuels and find cheaper green energy, but we're not there yet. And that's, of course, why most developing countries want more, not less, fossil fuels.
Bjorn, we're exactly in that position here in Australia, right? We're driving coal-fired power stations out of business before there's anything left there to replace them. We're seeing that in states like Victoria in particular, where I live. Promised to get rid of coal-fired electricity by 2035. We see the national government, we're going to have 82% of our electricity coming from renewables, it says, in 2030. That's just 8 years away. I mean, this dream of replacing renewable energy that fast, of replacing fossil fuels with renewable energy that fast, how realistic is it?
Very unrealistic. Look, an economist would argue you can buy anything you want. I mean, if you're willing to pay the price, of course you can just live with renewables and lots of backup power. You have to buy an enormous amount of batteries and all kinds of other ways to fix it, but you can pay your way out of it. Remember, in the U.S., this is estimated, if you actually go for the Biden administration's net zero promise by 2050, this could easily cost each American more than $11,000 per person per year. And this is US dollars at the same time. The simple point is, politicians who push this will not get reelected. You can't actually get most people to accept to pay that kind of cost. If you look at what has happened with renewables over the last, just 50 years, they've been pretty stable at 13, 14%, according to the International Energy Agency. Now they're up to 15%. If we look at their new estimate, that does trend upwards because lots and lots of people and lots of nations are paying more to get more renewables. It is likely that we will get to 30%. By 2050, 30% of the world's energy will come from renewables. And that also means that the trajectory means we will finish, that is, we'll get to 100% renewables in the latter part of next century. So look, people will tell you, oh, it's just around the corner. No, it's not. And we got to be honest about this. This is going to be very costly.
Honestly,
it's going to be very difficult, and we're not going to get it.
You just nailed the Lancet Medical Journal. I mean, there is no honesty, you know. And as for, the world is getting greener, yes, but in fact, that's led to a competition for the metals necessary for this transition, like lithium, 2,000% increase in price. I think the scramble is going to make this almost very much more unaffordable in the future, but we will see. Bjorn Lomborg, it's always great to talk to you, full of insights. Thank you so much for your time.